Welcome and good afternoon to everyone in the Eastern, Central, and Mountain time zones, and good morning for the folks from the Pacific time zone. For those of you I don't know, my name is Marty Barasco, and I am the chair of the Staffing Industry Practice Group at Becker. Becker is a boutique law firm with offices in New York City, Newport Beach, and Philadelphia. And I'd like to start out the webinar by just indicating that we're very excited here at Becker. We hit a couple of very important milestones in our staffing industry practice this year that I wanted to share with everyone because we're really proud of it and the hard work that our whole group did over the past couple of years. But at Becker, we now have represented over 120 brands in the staffing industry, and we represented in 2021 18 different clients in M&A transactions. And we believe that makes Becker the leading law firm in the industry in terms of clients represented and deals handled in 2021. So we're really excited about that news. As many of you know, an important goal at Becker is that we provide the staffing industry with thought leadership on topics that are critical to the industry. And at Becker, we don't just focus on the topics that we handle, legal topics, but we more often than not like to bring on industry leaders to talk about other topics that are impacting it, whether it be business, whether it be in operations, strategy. And we try and do this in a number of ways, writing articles, interviewing industry leaders, speaking at national and regional conferences. We host our own industry conferences, and of course, we hold this webinar series every year. And I couldn't be more excited to kick off this year's webinar series than with the topic and panel that we have assembled today. It's really an incredible topic. It is probably the best panel that we've ever had at Becker, and that is saying quite a lot. And it's on a topic that is not only critical for our industry, but I would dare say, for our country and our culture. And that the topic today is advancing women leaders in the staffing industry. I think probably everyone on this webinar has read the joint SIA, ASA, and TechServe report on gender diversity and equity in the staffing industry. And while there is a balance of gender diversity in our industry, probably not surprising to many folks, there is an inequity in pay between men and women in the industry, and there's an inequity of representation of women in leadership positions in the industry. And that inequity and the industry's failure to include women at the highest levels in the industry prevents our industry from reaching its full potential, its full economic potential, its full social, moral, and cultural potential. And of course, identifying the problem and understanding the negative impacts is really kind of the easy part of the equation. The more difficult part is how do you positively impact and address the problem. And we're so excited today to have 5 truly inspiring women leaders in the industry assembled to talk about this issue, to talk about their experiences in the industry, the tremendous work that they've been doing to help overcome this issue of inequity in the industry, and provide some advice on what we can all do who are listening in to help address the issue. So at this point, I'd like to step out of the way, and Ericka, I thank you for agreeing to lead today's discussion, and I thank WorkN for sponsoring the webinar, and please take the reins and lead us through this important discussion.
Marty, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here today. Great introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Ericka Hyson. I am the president of WorkN, and we specialize in helping the staffing industry build and execute on a mobile strategy to better service talent and clients. I come from 23 years in staffing, so I'm in software, but I come from staffing, and this topic is very near and dear to me, and certainly believe wholeheartedly about the potential and the opportunity, and the time is now for the industry. So thank you so much. It's a great way to start out 2022 to moderate this discussion with these extraordinarily talented and accomplished women who have really risen up their ranks and who have agreed graciously to share some of their stories with us today. And as Marty mentioned, SIA produced a very comprehensive report last fall on women in leadership in the industry. And despite the high proportion of women that are on the front lines and also in some managerial roles at staffing firms, women remain underrepresented at the executive and board levels. Women account for only 46% of executive positions and 36% of board seats in our industry. And even more staggering, some of the larger firms with revenue greater than 100 million, where women account for only 26% of executive positions and 16% of board seats. So it's really great to have such a diverse panel today that will be bringing some knowledge and intel from their experiences. And so I'd like to take an opportunity to invite each one of our panelists to introduce themselves. And when they do so, to share a little bit about your personal experiences advancing as leaders, despite the much adversity in rising up the ranks in your own careers and your personal passions for advancing women. And I have to preface this by saying, Marty, I know we only have an hour. We could talk on the subject all day, so I'll do my best for us to meet our goals of this webinar, which are really to share some really tactical advice, both at a corporation level, at a corporate level, of what things can you be doing more of, or maybe be inspired as you leave this webinar today to take some action in your own company, as well as for you as an individual, whether you're a man or a woman listening today. We hopefully will share some nuggets of some things that might inspire you to have some great takeaways coming out of today's session. So that's our commitment to you. And without further ado, I'm going to start with you, Jaime, if you don't mind introducing yourself. Jaime Donnelly is the CFO of Integrity Staffing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ericka. Thank you for having us all. So I started out in the staffing industry by accident, which I think a lot of us do, right? A lot of us land in staffing by accident. I took a job as a recruiting assistant at a company where the company I work for now, Integrity, was the staffing provider. And I built a really strong relationship with the owner of the organization, Todd Bavel. And Todd took me under his wing while I was a client. He coached me, and he was constantly setting me up for success in my role as a recruiting assistant, and I got promoted along the lines. But when it was time for me to make a move in my career, I immediately called Todd and said, hey, where could you place me? Do you have a client you could place me at? And he said, no, you're coming to me. And that's what happened. So 22 years ago, I went and started my career as an on-site representative at JP Chase for Integrity Staffing. We had about 100 associates working on site. And I started as an on-site representative, and over the course of the years, Todd just pushed and pushed for me to take on more and learn more. And I was hungry and ready to advance. And here I am, 22 years later, the CFO and president of our retail operations. And it is as natural in our organization to have women at the helm as it is for me to just breathe, right? So we have, over 60% of our leadership team is female. So it's always been that way within Integrity, and I feel very fortunate to have, quote unquote, grown up within the industry in a company where that supports and rallies around women so naturally and effortlessly.
It's wonderful to have your perspective. I know a lot of people are going to be interested to hear some of the secret sauce from Integrity today. So thank you for being here today, Jaime. Jasmine is the SVP of Enterprise at Talent Group. I'm going to have you introduce yourself next, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ericka, and super honored to be here with all of you. It's funny to hear Jaime's story because I identified a lot with that, just kind of happened to fall into the industry without really a plan to join the industry, but it was a great decision, a great opportunity that presented itself about 18 years ago. I joined one company and worked both sides of the desk and realized I really liked this type of industry, but I really wanted to be in a commissioned sales role. So I decided to stay with staffing, I found a great job, moved over to the new organization and spent about 16 years there. My first 6 years was in sales. I loved it. It was an incredible opportunity, and was promoted a couple of times after that. I joined Talent Group about 7 months ago as the SVP of Enterprise. And so it's interesting going from one really large staffing organization to a smaller private equity owned staffing organization. There's a unique piece to this story that I wanted to share with you guys. In the field, in the branch level, there was a lot of diversity in our branches. We had a lot of men and women in sales and recruiting. And over the years, as I was promoted, my first director level job, there was a time where I was the only female out of 70 men. And that was a really interesting time. But I would say that what I learned from that, which I hope to share with you guys today, is that when it comes to this topic, I think it's important to be willing to be uncomfortable, and also be willing to be the first person, and to allow other people to come in behind you, and hopefully in a somewhat less intimidating structure. But I've never looked back. I've enjoyed this industry so much, and during the time I have spent here, I've really seen it evolve and change, and super proud to be part of that. So thank you.
I love that. I think when we chatted, Jasmine, I kind of earmarked you as a trailblazer, because I know you created jobs and opportunities and roles that didn't exist before you for others coming in behind you, which is a really great place in your story. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about tactical things that we can be doing for others and advancing them, creating opportunity. Thank you so much. Susan, I'd love to turn it over to you to introduce yourself. Susan Larkin is the Chief Operating Officer of Allied Personnel Services.
Thank you, Ericka. We didn't share notes on this part, but I guess we all started our bio with, I found my way into staffing by accident, because I think that, to Jamie's point, that does happen to a lot of us. But when I was starting my career, coming out of college with a liberal arts degree and wanting to work in business, there weren't a ton of opportunities. So retail is where I found myself, and retail management was great. It was great for a 21-year-old go-getter looking to start a career. I learned a lot in retail. I learned problem solving, thinking on my feet, certainly working with people, working with difficult people, having the responsibility for a P&L, working at a fast pace, all of those things. And I really loved them, but finally the hours just wore me down. Couldn't see myself moving into the next phase of adulthood and starting a family while working crazy nights and weekends. So my goal was to get into human resources, and I thought the staffing industry kind of represented normal work to me, Monday through Friday. That little did I know, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. But I viewed it as a path to get into corporate human resources. But I really quickly learned that all of the things I loved about retail were easily transferable to staffing. So combine that with the fact that I joined a company that was really poised for growth, really hungry for growth at that time. And 27 years later, here I sit and just kept liking it more and more and more and more, and growing into different roles and opportunities. And I don't think the corporate HR career is the path for me. And here I sit 27 years later and couldn't be happier. So
Susan shared a little stat with me of the percentage of women in your company. Do you mind sharing that?
Did I give you a percentage? Was it 98, 97, something like that? Yeah, it's very high.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. We look forward to learning from your stories and experience. And last but not least, I'm very excited to introduce Cynthia Strickland, who has a unique perspective to share with this panel and this audience today. Cynthia is the principal consultant and a certified DEI consultant and practitioner for CNS Consultants. Cynthia has a wealth of experience to offer to this group today, and we are so happy to have you here. Cynthia, do you mind sharing a little bit about your story?
Sure, no problem. First and foremost, I'm not from the staffing industry, so my story is going to be slightly different, but I want to say I also am very honored to be here with all of you. My experience, I would say, from advancing women is where this perspective I'm going to speak from started probably when I was 5 on the basketball court with a bunch of guys who thought I shouldn't be there and wanted to relegate me to going home and playing with my dolls. I enjoyed playing with my dolls, but that wasn't the point. I was going to be there and represent. And most of my career in corporate, I've been the only. I'm the only Black, I'm the only woman, I'm the only LGBTQ when I wasn't out, then when I was out. And I was in predominantly white male roles in technology and consulting. But I've advocated not only for women, it's for everyone. And that's how I've moved through and started in the DEI niche. I had about a 20-year career in consulting when I decided I wanted to do something different. And the different thing was be an entrepreneur. And my most humbling moment was when I owned a cleaning franchise. All of my employees were women. And I had to work with people who were doing a role no one really wants to do, and they really don't want to do it for other people. So I had to figure out how to empower these women and to let them know that they were of value both as a person and as a resource. I took that same passion when I returned to the corporate world again. And when I did that, I decided I needed to continue a workspace for all where they were heard and valued, because my lived experience is that didn't necessarily always happen, and I had to make that available to both men and women. And so it wasn't an initiative that would inspire me to do that. It was the thing to do. And I want to finish and wrap this up with my why for doing this is in particular for my nieces, but also for my nephews, in that I want them to have an equitable and fair and inclusive working environment as they grow.
I love that. I love your why. And I know, I think it's a great story of the need for building an environment for inclusivity. And I love that you're saying it's the thing to do. And I think your experience is going to be really beneficial to our audience here today. So actually, I'm going to start with you, Cynthia, on this next question, which is really about, what we think, we know the pandemic has hit women disproportionately hard. And we also know that men have been disproportionately hit because of COVID. There's a lot of new dynamics in the world of work that in the staffing industry is feeling particularly harder than others. Our customers are realizing firsthand the way the world of work is changing, and things that they thought are going to go back to the old way are not. So every day is a new challenge, and people are leaving the workforce in droves, including a disproportionate number of women. And I'd just really like to start by asking each of our panelists, but I'll start with you, Cynthia, since you get to touch so many different customers in your role as a consultant in the DEI space. Where you think are the biggest gaps in supporting women specifically in the workplace right now?
Sure. And again, it's women and men, but women, there are targets that organizations have. And so one of the areas that it's hurting women, I think, is around when you have targets around diversity and equity and inclusion, what are the accountability systems associated with that? So, and within that, what's the consequence of not achieving some of those targets? Not for it to be punitive, but how are we shifting and addressing why we can't achieve these goals, and how we can be more accountable around them? Because there are a limited number of roles also. If I listen to my panelists here, they're few and far between, but that shouldn't be an out for not presenting an opportunity for women. I also think there's education around bias and gender roles. And it's why can't a woman be considered for roles? So there's training and skills there too. I also have to say I want women to look at each other. Are we examining how we're helping each other? It's okay to lean into men, and we need men, but we also have to look at how are we providing those support mechanisms for each other. So there's how are we being biased also, and how we are providing support. And last but not least, it's around professional development, especially in this virtual environment. I am not talking about going backward. I love going forward, because that's the only way I understand how to move. So how do we take advantage of this virtual environment where maybe women have had to not be able to engage in some activities to advance their professional development? And I mean, sometimes that's just hanging out with other people you work with. And you had to go home, you had other responsibilities. I have a pet, I'm a pet parent. I had other responsibilities. So now in this virtual environment, how is that more accommodating and allowing flexibility in engaging in some of those peer groups or outside those peer groups to develop yourself, learn more, and even some education? So again, 3 things: accountability systems, learning around bias and gender, and also professional development.
I can't wait to talk about some tactical things we can be doing about these gaps in a minute. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Jasmine, would you like to share a little bit about your opinions on what you've seen? I know you've worked for large organizations, you're relatively new to your role, what either internally or with your clients on where the gaps are in this day and age, going into 2022.
Sure. Well, I think it's one of the things that I've stumbled upon over and over and over again with customers, and I'll talk about those external experiences first. We hear them talk about wanting to create diversity in their environment, and the same customers year over year are still talking about it, you know, and they're not necessarily doing anything about it, and the needle isn't moving. So for me, I think the message is that we can't afford to just talk about it, and we can't afford just to build, you know, groups of people to talk about it. I think the question comes at the C-level within an organization. What are they willing to actually do about it beyond forming committees and having conversations, and then putting measurable action items in place? I say that at the same time, I want to say a personal, you know, side of that. Yes, I've definitely benefited from working for great organizations that have done things like that, and have had opportunities for training and professional development. But there does come a point too where on the individual, it becomes our responsibility to seek out those opportunities, whether it's internally within your organization or externally. So I think that that's really important, and not just to rely on an organization for it, but at the organizational level, I would say the goal is important to put some action items in place that go beyond having discussions.
Yeah, I think that's great. So having organizational support, not just a few messages on a wall or a poster or initiative you can check the box and say we care about this, but have some tactical results. Right. Jaime, I know you and I chatted a little bit about kind of a different perspective and at an organizational level, and I think it was kind of personal for you. I'd love to hear your perspective on where you feel like some of the biggest gaps are in women advancing up the ranks in their careers.
I think we have to be more intentional as women and as partners to women about not allowing women to undermine themselves, because we do it so easily and so quickly. And I'll tell you that I've done it to myself over the years many, many times, but I've been really fortunate to work with people within my organization and within the industry who don't allow me to do that, who champion me and bolster me and push me to that next level and rally around me when I don't quite believe in myself, having those people who believe in me and remind me to believe in myself. So I think being really intentional about rallying around women and supporting them and not letting them undermine themselves or doubt themselves is something that we should do. And it can be as and this sounds like a silly example, but it's not. Simple, super simple, as not pointing to the only woman in the meeting to take the notes, right? Like something as simple as that, right? Doesn't allow a woman to undermine her value as she's sitting in that meeting. But it can be as impactful as encouraging a woman on your team or someone that you work with in the industry to apply for that bigger role that she might not think she's ready for, but really push her and help her to do that. That's something that I believe is an easy gap for us to fill. You don't need an initiative for that, to just simply to support and rally around women.
I love that. And Susan, I know you and I chatted about just the pandemic and what you're seeing with your 95% of your workforce being women. Love to hear what you're seeing on the ground of what you feel like where the gaps are and where women are needing additional support in your organization. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm undermining myself. What Jaime just said reminded me, though, we don't talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves, and that's so hard. I hope one of you has a tip for me on how to change that behavior, but we would never say things to other people that we say in our heads to ourselves. But I think the thing we've all felt for the past couple of years is sort of that lack of resources, sort of the theme through the pandemic. Most of our clients, staffing company clients are feeling it. And I think it's an issue regardless of the size of your organization right now. You may be part of a large organization, but your team may be small. You may be in a branch office that's small. So the resources that, we may have had just a few years ago, we don't have. Everybody's kind of doing more with less. But I think the last 2 years, we've all been incredibly innovative because we were forced to. And I think we need to kind of take that mindset and force ourselves to make some of these other changes, just because it's not, they are mission critical. We don't think of them that way, but I think we've kind of reassessed how we do a lot of things, and we need to kind of take that same mindset to the way we support and empower women in our organizations, whether it's the work-life balance, the flexibility, training and development, all of those things that, I never would have imagined that we could work a flexible work from home hybrid sort of schedule into commercial staffing, because it's on site. It's, the working with the light industrial candidates, you have to be there. Well, guess what? You don't all the time. But we figured that out because we had to. So I think figuring out, innovative solutions to deal with sort of the lack of resources we all have right now.
Right, having the mindset set to embrace change and look at the world in a new way and approach work in a different way has been really successful in your organization. I applaud you all for that. And I'm excited to kind of shift. I mean, we know there's a lot of gaps out there, and I think for our audience here, I'd love to just maybe for this next question, really address at an organizational level. So for those of us, we've heard the stat that SIA reported, that many firms are, the executive presence and board presence for staffing firms over 100 million in revenue is only 56%, and 26% of executives and 16% of board members for $100 million plus firms. And while many organizations are talking about DEI initiatives, which is a start, as well as making executive priority, some others who might be on this call even may be wondering where to begin and how might I approach looking at sustainable changes on a corporate level. And Cynthia, I'd love to have you start first to share from your experience, and then perhaps Jasmine, we can jump over to you just to share some of your perspective on the question of, where do I begin and how do I decide where to begin, and how do I make sure that whatever I'm doing right now is sustainable? We talked about accountability and actually putting goals in place. How do we make sure, what advice do you have? And Cynthia, if you don't mind, I'll have you start.
Sure. So DEI is most impactful at the system level, but you have to, within that system, start with the people. So I have 3 M's around that, and that is the mirror, a microcosm, and marginalize. So what I mean by that is the mirror. There's an awareness, there's a self-awareness, and there's looking at, is this a reflection of where and what I want to be, and where and what I want this organization to be? And if it's not, what do I want to do about it? The microcosm, take a pulse of the organization. What is the organization also telling you? Is the culture a microcosm of society? Again, is that where and what you want it to be? Do you want to be a speak up organization? I had one CEO tell me when I asked them to describe their organization, they said it was intentionally belonging. So what do you want? You know, identify that. And act on it, as everyone has continued to say. And then finally, marginalize. What I want to see happen there is, how do you want to reshape the representation? This is where the discomfort comes in. It's not going to be easy. And I call this area #doing the work. And you have to then invest in the time and the resources and the people and stay committed to the work. And it's ugly sometimes, and sometimes things don't work. And I think the best scenario there is to say what didn't work and now how you're going to shift and change to make adjustments. So it's someone else that said it's really dealing with the discomfort after you've gone through the awareness and the pulse of the organization, and the priorities will filter out from there on what's next.
Thank you. Jasmine, I'd love to turn this over to you. I know you have a lot of passion for a call to action at a corporate level. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your perspective here?
Sure. Thanks, Ericka. So one of the opportunities joining a new organization, I got to be part of writing our diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. And as we were writing it and putting it together, you know, it kind of dawned on me that it's also action, right? So we wrote this D, E, and I, and A statement, right? Just accepting responsibility for actively contributing to the change and not just talking about it as well. And through that, we as an organization are also committed to supporting our customers' diversity and equity, inclusion, and action goals by, quite simply, if we're providing diverse pool of candidates and our customers are interested in creating a diverse team, that we'll work with them to offer the appropriate training to address the skill set gaps that exist. And it's not just about women and diversity. This is all forms of diversity that it applies to. So not only internally, how are we taking action, but in our everyday work and the things that we do, how can we support our clients as well? So that's one piece that I'm super passionate about, supporting that and helping bridging gaps there. But then also there are other things that I've had the experience of, for example, being part of a women's leadership forum and impacting our internal organization by having monthly guest speakers come to help influence and inspire and share their great stories. And hopefully that helps other people hear how to do it, how they've done it, and feel that it's something that they can accomplish too. But then also there is the whole outside of your organization, right? What can you do to positively contribute to your communities? And there are action items around finding diversity organizations to support, helping people prepare for interviews. Dress for Success is a great organization that Women's Leadership Forum supported. So things like that, I really believe in giving back, not just to your company, not just to your clients, but looking at all circles of influence that we can support when it comes to that.
I love that. And I think I also share your optimism that the staffing industry is in a unique position to help drive systemic change, not only in our own companies, but all out there with our own clients as well. I also love the idea of supporting community things that might seem small, you know, shopping from minority represented businesses, small businesses for holiday season, et cetera. Those are all great programs. And for this, I'm going to kind of shift over, same topic, but a little bit of a different question. You know, as I think SIA shared in their very comprehensive report, that's for 6 out of 7 initiatives that are that they asked about on the survey, that staffing firms that are operating programs that support the advancement of women, that could be from D&I women's groups or marketing campaigns to attract female talent, that 6 out of 7 types of initiatives were being used by less than half of the US staffing firms, so even among large staffing firms. So there is a lot of opportunity to do more. So I'm just gonna say we're just shining a light on this today. There's no judgment, but I would love to hear from Susan, Jaime, maybe we can start with you. What ways your organization are supporting women in leadership in advancing, and what innovative solutions you might have internally that maybe inspire others that we can leverage at a company level to better support women right now in your staffing companies. Susan, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Sure. I think really what's key for us is something that's really just a core part of our culture is we're extremely team focused. So I think staffing is inherently very competitive industry. We love hiring people that are competitive, right? I have some former college athletes on my team, and they're superstars. So we love that competitive nature that people have, but we really don't want it within our team. We really try to keep it outside of our walls, and within here we try to really just have a very collaborative environment, really supporting each other. We have a pooled system for commissions, so we've kind of removed that looking out for yourself, looking out for your own paycheck. We're all in it together, and that really kind of fosters that, and really just that collaborative, supportive, taking it to the everything we do. So we have, cross training is really kind of embedded into everything we do. So you always know somebody else knows what I'm doing. I could leave and somebody could sit right down and pick up where I left off. People, share relationships, systems, processes. It's built into what we do. So you feel supported, you feel like you're not competing with each other, and you really are a team competing with everyone else on the outside. And that's been critical for us.
I love that idea. I love the idea of what's good for your customers is good for everyone. And by having shared commissions, and that allows people to have that flexibility if they need to take a day and do something, or someone's sick, which happens a lot right now. I think that's a really cool, innovative way to approach that. Thank you for sharing that. Jaime, I know the culture at Integrity is really special, so I'd love it if you could share a little bit of your secret sauce and some of the maybe initiatives or two that might inspire some others that are listening on things that are working really well at Integrity.
Yeah, I'd love to. We have a set of core values, much like everybody else on this panel has for their organization and people listening in. And we've built a culture that really enables our staff to move mountains for our associates to be successful. And that translates so easily to our staff and with one another. And it's not just about making sure that our associates are successful, it's about making sure we are internally successful as well. And one of our core values is just simply called bigger boots, right? And we encourage all of our staff members to take on those roles that are just a little bit too big for them. Putting on a pair of boots that may be a half size or a full size too big for where their feet are right now. And we encourage our teams to do that. And we as leaders rally around them to determine what we need to do to mentor and train and develop them to get into those bigger boots and really fill them out. And that is such a simple thing that you can do for so many women within your organization. It creates this philosophy of bigger boots, creates opportunities for many underserved groups, women just being one of them, to gain access to roles that they might not otherwise have because they haven't grown into those boots yet. They haven't had the experiences. So if you can identify the gaps and then put a plan in to support them and rally around them, you're going to give opportunities to women that just haven't been there in the past.
I love that. I think it's such an important way to create a culture that basically sets an expectation and the tone that you're always going to be uncomfortable because your boots are going to be too big, right? So I love that. I think the big boots, it resonates for me in my own career of just always stepping into things outside of my comfort zone. That's really awesome. Jasmine, I might ask you to share a little bit. We've talked a little bit in prep for this panel just about skills gaps in organizations, and we talk about building and filling those big boots. From your experience, where you've seen some really effective ways to bridge skills gaps both internally and for customers.
Sure. So I think that the concept, going back to the action piece of it, is really important. But there's also on the other side of the equation, the willingness, right, to embrace diversity and do something about it. Because no matter how hard this side and the staffing agency can be, it also, our clients have to be receptive to the idea and be willing to address any gaps that exist. I think we've all heard stories of customers that have had positions open for 8 or 9 months, and they're having a really hard time filling it, looking for the perfect candidate that has absolutely every single thing they're looking for. And also, wouldn't it be great if they were diverse too, because there's this big diversity initiative within the organization, and that role goes unfilled for a long period of time. I think the concept is, if we are providing a diverse pool of candidates and a customer is willing to allow for training to address that skill set gap, it really helps them not only fill roles faster, identify talent faster, but also to do something to fill bigger boots, right? To allow people opportunities for growth. And I think we all have to be a little bit creative in hiring roles and partnering with our customers to help them accomplish their goals, to kind of think outside of the box, right? How much is it going to cost to keep that position open for another 8 or 9 months? How much harm is that doing to your existing team? Wouldn't it be great if you were a leader within your organization, showing them how this strategy can work, and that you're also creating diversity? So I look back throughout my career and just think, my goodness, why weren't we doing this a long time ago? Why did it take all of the noise? But it did work. It is impactful, and I think that's a really important solution for people to consider. And in the staffing industry, it's something that we can encourage our clients to do and tell great stories about as well. So I think
it takes that new skill set, right? In the staffing industry, so many times we feel the pressure to get exactly the talent that fits every single box of their requirements, and it's a new skill set, right, and an art to be able to market talent that may not be able to check every box and convince a customer to take a chance on someone that might not have every skill but have the potential to fill those boots. And I know it's an added challenge for the staffing industry to be able to reinvent the way they go to market and positioning talent to meet these demands.
One more thought to add to that is, too, if the position's been open forever and the talent doesn't exist, then we've got an opportunity to create it. If it doesn't exist, we get to build it together. And I think that's pretty powerful too. So
that's really exciting. Well, I thought I would just take a minute, and I am not that familiar with the GoToWebinar, but I'm optimistic that we can engage our audience. And thank you all so much for being here to be a part of this while I call on some of the ladies on our panel. But I'd love to hear from you some suggestions of resources, tools that may have helped you in your organizations at a company level that our audience can tap into. And Cynthia, I'll start with you, and then Susan and Jaime. I have a few I might drop in as well. But if those folks attending, if you want to feel free to drop in the chat and share. We're here to share and learn from each other. So if you have resources and tools that have worked for your organizations, we'd love to hear about them for everyone as well, if you want to drop it in the chat. Cynthia, I know that you have a wealth of tools and resources available to your client base. I'm going to start with you and sharing some things that have really either worked really well for you and your experiences with your clients, or maybe that impacted you professionally in your own career development.
Sure. I'm sure there are a number of organizations nationally. I've looked at the Women's Diversity Network. There's the National Association for Female Executives. So there's groups to join. My recommendation and what I experienced was affinity groups, meaning there was a group, the Executive Leadership Council, that was focused around Black leaders, middle management. And it's really important for you to go to a group with people who look like you, who have ascended to the levels that you're trying to achieve, and hear their story and understand what it took for them to get there. Also, you can bring that same information back into a broader group, but when you have that recognition and you have that person that's walked the path, that can be very helpful. So that was a group specific to Black individuals. My point here is there are affinity groups like that across the spectrum, Latin, Asian, etc. And so I would say organizations, if you can seek those out, you won't hear about them necessarily, they exist.
You know, it's funny, Cynthia and I actually met a long time ago at a Girls in Tech conference. And we just realized that as we were prepping for this panel, and it was outside of the staffing industry, but certainly something I was passionate about, being in IT staffing for 20 years of my career. And I was like, Cynthia, you look so familiar. How do I know you? And she said, oh, I spoke at that Catalyst conference that you attended. So it is great to get outside and look outside of your own industry as well. Susan, I know you've had some experience leveraging third parties to help you with some initiatives. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, bringing it back to the staffing industry, we've had good success with Butler Street. Has some amazing sales training programs and leadership development programs. A new one that they just partnered with SIA for that looks really exciting. So we've had great success with those, and to Cynthia's point, seeing people that you aspire to, to do what they've done. TempNet has been an amazing organization for our company and for me personally. And so TempNet is an organization of independent staffing companies around the country, non-competitive, and it's the best resource for us because it's talking to people that you don't compete with and that are going through exactly what you're going through. And it let me, from early in my career, see women owners of staffing firms and learn from them and really just, model my career after seeing what I wanted to be. And TempNet gave me that. So if anyone is, looking for information about TempNet, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to share the organization with you. It's wonderful.
Common theme for having great role models here, I'm hearing from a resource perspective. How about you, Jaime?
So I would say I agree. First, Butler Street, amazing leadership training. Absolutely, if you have an opportunity, to go for that, do it. And it's good for anyone within your organization. Affinity groups, I'm so fortunate to be part of an organization called Chief, which is all women executive leaders. And if you'd like information about that, I'd be happy to share that as well. But I am definitely about keeping this simple, guys, right? There's so many things that you could do just that don't require big initiatives that will make an immediate impact within your organization. And I'm a big fan of imitation as being the greatest form of flattery. And we all have resources right within our industry. ASA has a framework for mentorship that you can easily use, right? You don't need to be an expert in setting up this kind of initiative, but you could personally use it to mentor another woman within your organization with the ASA mentorship framework. It's so simple to use and it doesn't need to be complex. It really doesn't.
That's great. I will second the ASA mentor program. It's amazing. This is my third year doing it, and they make it super easy. And maybe just in the essence of time, I know as we think of other resources, maybe we can pepper them in with our responses in the next question, which is really about the individual level, right? So for many attendees today, it might feel a little bit out of reach to take on some large corporate initiative. They may not feel like you have the seat at the table, so to speak, to be able to make big changes in your own company. And I'd love to just shift the discussion with this limited time that we have left to talk about some tactical advice for every individual here today, both men and women. And ladies, I'd love to just open it up for what advice you can share and perhaps pull from your personal experiences, throw some resources in. Jasmine, I'm actually going to start with you for this question. What women can be doing more of to support each other in the workforce or to do for themselves, to, as you pointed out earlier, to make some changes on a small scale that might lead to something a little bit larger for your company and inspire things in others.
Sure, thanks. So there are a couple of different things that I kind of feel like all fall back to the same message about building relationships, right? When you talk about growing within organizations and having opportunities and helping other people navigate those changes as well, I think it kind of all falls back to building relationships and networking internally, you know, at all levels and with all sorts of people. So it's not necessarily just how can women support other women, I think is my answer. It's more about building relationships. And someone once said to me how important it is to have your own personal board of directors, people that you can trust and confide in and can go to in a non-threatening environment that you feel like are going to be honest and give you good feedback and share their stories too. That term stuck with me, and I think it's something that everybody needs, not necessarily at the peer level, right? But people that are in the roles that you're interested in, that model the behavior that you want to grow, you know, how did they do it? And if they can provide any influence or insight or, you know, help you navigate political challenges, I think that personal board of directors thing is something that stuck with me, and I think really it works. So that is one piece of advice I would give.
I love that. Jaime, what about you? What are some things that you feel like, you talked earlier about sort of imposter syndrome and helping women have more confidence at office. What are some things that you see happening in your company and you find yourself doing, you do for yourself and for others?
Very simple things to do every day. It doesn't take a lot of time. One, champion for other women, right? Speak up for one another. Call on each other in meetings or, you know, in those times where you can get input, thoughts, feedback on a topic that's being discussed. If you can intentionally call on another woman to give her that space that she might be a little afraid to speak up into, then you're helping just in that one moment in the day. And then additionally, provide really direct, positive, specific feedback to recognize women on your team. We're really good. Everyone is really good about pointing out all the things that are going wrong or where people have opportunities for development. But if you can find one thing to provide very specific, positive feedback onto a woman, I guarantee you she's going to do that over and over again, and it's going to become a superpower for her. That positive reinforcement sticks longer when it's specific, and it helps to build their confidence and repeat that behavior again.
I love that. What about you, Susan?
You know, some of the things I've thought of or sort of the same flavor as what you just said, Jaime. I think being intentional is really important. I think, you know, we need to give development and mentoring and self-care and all of those things the same priority that we give everything else in our businesses, and schedule time to do things and book time to do the things that we always get pushed away, which whether it's mentoring, you know, the training and development, doing webinars, reading, whatever it is. I think if you schedule it, it's more likely to happen. And I think if you do we'll get to it, or ASAP, you know, we all know this industry, the day gets away from you any chance you let it. So being intentional, I think, is really important. And I think, you know, one of the things we do here is we really try to establish from day one with people, you know, we don't want to beat around the bush. We don't play games here. We want to have direct conversations, direct discussions. You should always feel comfortable that you can come and share your thoughts, your concerns, anything like that. So one of the questions we ask everybody, you know, at any regular review, and they know this is going to be part of it, is what's the most important thing we should talk about today? And that just the framing of that question really makes people stop and think, and they get it after a while. It doesn't have to be related to your job. It doesn't have to be related to the business at all. It might be about something completely personal. But if it's the most important thing we should talk about it, let's talk about it.
That's great. I love that advice. That's great. Cynthia, you and I had chatted a little bit about your passion for amplifying voices, right? So Susan's talking about making sure you're talking about the right things. And Cynthia, I know you talk about, like, how do we make your voice louder? I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure, of course, they all stole everything I was thinking and going to say, but I'll amplify what they provided in that. First and foremost, you know, as leaders, be approachable. And so if you're approachable, then these things can happen. And the board of directors is really where I was going, Jasmine. And those are the folks that are going to help you with that. So the mentor's guidance, the advocate, they're going to speak up for you. The sponsor is going to pound the table. The coach is going to help you in, I think some of what you were saying, Jaime, of I'm going to be direct with you around this. Here are some areas where you can grow. But you need those, I think, 4 key players that are sitting at that table that are going to represent you and speak up for you and give you the opportunity to speak or mention your name to say you should be in that opportunity. So it's how can we align as leaders to provide those opportunities for other people, because and that's the modeling, so that they understand how to amplify their voice. Because Susan, like you're saying, you're there representing this is how it's done.
That's a wonderful segue into my next topic. And I know we only have about 4 minutes left, but I think we need to hit on this one. And research suggests that men have a huge role to play in overcoming historical patterns, unconscious bias, and really to become active advocates of women and to help knock down barriers to their advancement. And Jaime and I had the privilege of being on a panel. We talked about how important it is for male allyship and how we as women can invite more men to the table for this discussion to be better supporters and allies and advocates. And Jasmine, I'd love to turn it over to you just to answer, how can we invite more men to the table for this discussion? Might have time for 2 of you to chime in here. So Jasmine and then maybe Jaime.
Sure, I'll go with the brief version of this story. When my former employer, when we were building this Women's Leadership Forum, the question, was, do we invite the men to be part of this group? And we decided, for a lot of reasons, yes, it's incredibly important to allow for that allyship, right, or championing of the individuals and support. And we realized and know that we are so much stronger together. And those men that chose to participate in that program became champions of it. And the women that were in that program felt so much more supported because their leaders and peers and male peers were part of that. So I think also it's important to think, my goodness, what would happen if the roles were reversed and people chose to exclude women? I mean, how unfortunate would that be? So that's just one example, one personal story I think is really important. And again, speaking to that male group that may be interested in wanting to do this, it's just starting by maybe listening, be willing to be uncomfortable, have uncomfortable conversations, and just start by willing to do that, and it hopefully will naturally progress from there. So
yeah, great advice. Jaime, anything to add?
Yeah, again, it doesn't have to be overly complex or overwhelming, and it's as simple as a small gesture. When I was rising through the ranks, the owner of my organization, Todd, would come to these big meetings with me with some critical vendors, and I had a banker once who kept directing his questions towards Todd in this meeting, and Todd looked right at the banker and said, "Why are you talking to me? You need to talk to Jaime. She owns this. She's the decision maker. You talk to Jaime." It was an empowering moment that has carried me through in so many similar situations throughout the years. So again, it doesn't have to be complex. It can be something very simple and small as that, and advocating for women in an everyday situation.
That's wonderful. So we have 1 minute left, and I have to say this has been awesome, a lot of fun. We've got a lot of good tips. I'm hoping that our attendees benefited as much as I did from hearing from all of you today. I may tee it up and thank you all in advance to let our audience know that everyone on the panel has agreed that they would be willing to connect with you, and if you want to reach out to any of us, we are happy to connect with you, network, share some more stories. We could talk about this topic all day. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your wealth of experience today and your openness to taking follow-up networking calls to really demonstrate your passion for advocating and advancing other women. So thank you for taking that to heart. And Marty, thank you again for hosting this wonderful webinar. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, Ericka, Jaime, Susan, Cynthia, and Jasmine, you really shared a great deal with the audience. I know that, you know, from my perspective and from a number of the items that you brought up and the way you discussed them and challenged folks here in how we can deal with these issues better to promote advancing women more in the staffing industry and across the spectrum in business. I really appreciate it, and I thank you. From a housekeeping perspective, we will turn this into a webinar that will be available on our website. We will email it out. And I challenge the folks on this in this audience to I forget what speaker said it, but to have the uncomfortable conversations. If you're a leader and you are on this webinar, you know, really take to heart the tremendous advice that these speakers gave on addressing this inequality and also making the environment more inclusive, which is going to be better for everyone. And a small challenge, if you're not a leader, but looking and aspiring to be a leader, I challenge you to have that uncomfortable conversation, which might start with forwarding this webinar and the powerful message that was made on it to folks within your organization, and challenging them to take up the mantle that was discussed today. Well, I thank everyone for joining and appreciate all of your time. And again, thank you to the panelists. This was tremendous. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.